Welcome to the Nonprofits. Today we start out with another example of what I can only generously describe as police brutality and murder. Cindy, can you fill us in on this incident?
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about the worst case of police violence I've ever seen globally, internationally. A Black woman, Sonia Massi, who was 36 with 2 children, called the police because she thought there was a prowler nearby. The police comes to her house and finally ended up killing her, apparently because they feared a pot of boiling water. This story is brought to us by CNN and Eric Levinson, Gillian Sykes, and Brett Parks on July 23rd, 2024.
So, Cindy, were there any obvious warning signs that from Grayson himself? Because it sounds like a rather mundane incident. Were there any signs of him in his past and his history that he might not be the best fit for a police officer? Because this just sounds completely over the top, at least initially. This sounds just absolutely unbelievable that he would do this.
Yeah, there were signs, and I can't believe that this can happen in the greatest country on earth, because normal countries have background checks before you join the police or the military. Here, we have a guy who was discharged for misconduct from the army. He pled guilty for DUI twice while he was serving. He got several complaints filed against him for inappropriate behavior as a cop, but they were all dismissed. He got 6 different police jobs in different places in the last 4 years. So that's what we know. We also know that his police union filed a grievance to reverse his termination because they think he was fired without cause, which is probably the craziest thing in all this. And the sheriff who hired him just refused to resign. This guy should never have been here in the first place. And yet, we have another case of a Black woman killed by the police without her doing anything wrong. And it just kills me, this level of entitlement and violence and arrogance from the police in the US. It's just amazing.
It seems that nobody wants to take blame for this situation. They just want to pretend it didn't happen. But Eli, ultimately, I've seen the video, and from my perspective, she cast a magic spell, or to take it more seriously, she just jokingly said, I don't think there was any malice or intent or any evil in what she said, even though, what do you believe in magic? What do you think? Is that a normal reaction? Would you react that way if someone cast a magic spell towards you that way?
So nobody wants to be Monday morning quarterback, so to speak, right? Like I've been in some use of force type scenarios. So I have some experience and some, I think, framework to work with. That went so high, so fast. It was unbelievable. I thought I replayed the video because I thought I missed something, but all they skipped was if you go and you find the full video from another source, the only thing they skipped was the part where they pulled the trigger, or the trigger is I didn't clarify for myself whether both of them shot or just Grayson, but it was kind of just like you said, it seemed like they were joking. They were kind of laughing around on the couch, as you mentioned, Cindy, in the intro, she had called for help because she thought someone was outside her house. They were inside, investigating her. And then kind of hey, go get that pot. And then he steps away and she jokes oh, where are you going? And oh, I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. It sounded like a joke. They were laughing. And then he's immediately just I don't know if I don't want to necessarily say what he said because I don't know how it's going to work with censorship and everything, but the threat that he made to her. And then within seconds, as she's cowering, in fear for her life after just making a joke, she's dead. And it's absolutely, just like Cindy said, it's absolutely wild to me.
I absolutely couldn't understand because I felt there was no malice. This is just a person joking around. And what I will assert is that you could hear the water is already poured into the sink, because when they're complaining about the water, you can actually hear in the audio, you can hear the splash of the hot water hitting the lukewarm sink. So the water is a done deal. So to claim that the water is a concern, or the water is something that people should be concerned about, is absolutely absurd. Because, I mean, what are they afraid of? Getting hit by a pot by a not a young woman either, who's just reporting a problem and in no way has done anything. So it was absolutely amazing to me. But do you think it's because Grayson took the spell seriously? Do you really think that's what it is?
I really hope not, but like if you listen to his voice, it's like, from how quickly he switched his mood like that, it kind of sounds like he did. He was like, "Are you really like?" It seems like he was so scared of being, he panicked that he was going to go to hell, and so he killed somebody. And I just can't reconcile that with reality. It does, I have a hard time getting there.
The problem is that it's not whether you or I understand that reality, but whether people living day to day to do. Now, the truth is, I think we probably have somebody who has some other problems, as Cindy alluded to. And Cindy, I wanted to ask you, do you think, because, his partner's camera's on, but I didn't see his view from his camera.
No, so his camera was turned off and he only turned it on after the shooting. But I'd like to respond to your question, your previous question. Did he the spell seriously? And so I have to, in the days between when I read the article first and when we now are recording this, I was considering asking you guys to not talk about the religious aspect, because we are the ACA and we have the reputation of, being hard on religion sometimes, being against religion or whatever, however they want to frame it. And I was a little bit afraid that talking about this would push away from the real issue. But in fact, after considering it and after thinking about it, I think it is relevant in this case because, as you said, I think the association between the incantation and boiling water in the unconscious of Christians, it's like holy water in contact with evil, and the association between the incantation and this, maybe that's what scared him. Obviously, this is a possible explanation and not a justification. Yeah, I think it's important to talk about it because it asks the question of how do you train police officers to respond to this if they themselves have a deeply held belief, religious belief at least. And I think that's an interesting discussion to have.
Yes, I would have to agree that there's this whole thing that you have to be able to put some of those things aside, because I do think that, unfortunately, this is an example of, once again, how dangerous Christianity can be, because I think he was very likely primed that way in just an inflammatory way. If nothing else, he thought as it being disdainful. So either way, I just see that it being an offense to him. But having said that, I do think that it does call into view, as you said, Cindy, the fact that we need police who are better trained. We need police, in my opinion, who have different priorities and better priorities. But when you saw this, what did you think what is the realistic things that we could do to try to make sure that something like this didn't happen again?
It's really difficult to say. In the past minute or so, one of you mentioned how do you train police to handle something like this, appropriately? I think that's what you said, Cindy. When they have this deeply held belief that, something not just acutely bad in the physical world, but eternally bad might happen to them if that person is allowed to finish saying what they're saying, they're going to do whatever they can to stop that person from saying it. It is a really difficult thing to manage. And the only way you can go about it with people who have that sincerely held belief is to play the aspect that anybody that thinks that is just, they're mentally unwell, they're mentally ill. And, you just have to, anybody who's speaking that way, you just have to treat them that way. And then you can convince the people that believe that something like that is possible, that the people who are mentally unwell unwell don't carry the will of God and can't like do that. That would be, I feel like, the only way. And that's a terrifying prospect to me, to feel like the only way to prevent something like this, if that's the motivation for like why this happened, if we're kind of on the right track here, it's concerning to me, the idea that one possible solution to that is to play into the delusion that it is possible, just to get them to believe that these people, like the people they're interacting with every day, can't do it.
Yeah, I think it's extremely ironic what you're saying, because I know that many people in the ACA are trying to fight the idea that a deeply held belief is insanity, because we see that every time in social media. And
I definitely don't, let me interject here. I definitely don't think that it's insanity at all. But I do think that what we do have is we have one person who there's a long trail of excess. He didn't just wake up this morning and get set off by a woman with some hot water in Jesus' name. He showed a pattern, an escalating pattern of a problem. I mean, you demonstrated changing jobs 6 times. You know, this guy has had clear incidents. I think there's a few DUIs that throw into the mix. There's somebody who has other issues that need to be addressed that probably shouldn't be carrying a badge, not because he's holding up for Jesus, but that there's some issues there that it should be addressed, and he shouldn't be a police officer.
Yeah, we were talking about in a specific context of how do you train police officers who have a deeply held belief to deal with this situation. And if we went to Eli's idea, then we would suggest somehow to the population that the limit between insanity and, or not insanity, but mental health and belief is much more blurry than they want to admit.
I think that's a dangerous place to go.
Exactly, that's my point. But
it's a very dangerous place to go.
Regarding the, I think the first one should be a national database of fired cops. The second one is better background checks on people who sign up, better training on de-escalation and managing different situations without using their gun. I think if we start with this, we are going to strongly limit this. And in the background checks, I would, and I know that this is controversial in the US, but any person who showed any affiliation to extreme right or extreme left ideologies, they shouldn't be able to be recruited.
Yeah, I definitely don't think that we could get that part passed through. However, I will say that a goal of some type of system that lets cops know, that lets police officers and police departments around the country know that this person has had a problem, because I'm sure there's a lot of opportunity where things slip through the cracks, because that's the reality of the world we live in. Now, one of the things that I did find interesting is that watching that video and seeing what I was seeing, I have to wonder, and this is me personally, not speaking for anyone else, why did he have his gun hand on his gun right there at that moment? Immediate. That's his first go-to. And I think that's just more symbolic of the mentality that we have, and you mentioned earlier, of de-escalation and all the other tactics, because the guns way down the list. You know, and I agree, those are things that I think would improve and help make it a safer situation, because this just simply didn't need to happen. Nobody needs to know her name. And that would be the best thing, because then her family could enjoy her and they could appreciate her. And it would be great for us not to even have to know who she is. But the reality that we do, it does make it important for us to recognize that police obviously need to change what they're doing, because this isn't working. And I do think that one problem we have, and Eli, I know you and I may differ on this, but I think that we've come to making police police more of a military aspect towards an enemy rather than a community. And I think that that's a huge mistake, because once you create an adversarial situation like that, deliberately baked into it, you're going to make things adversarial. And so I think that one thing, like Cindy said, is that I do think that we need to see, certain de-escalation and things like that. Eli, you go ahead.
No, I'll say that I agree with you on that completely. I'll point out, I'll clarify that what I was saying earlier is not to teach that or to imply that being religious and having mental illness are one and the same, but just that in order to, like, let's say if somebody were going to convince Grayson that this woman isn't capable of like sending him to hell because of a Jesus spell, it would be not by convincing him that Jesus and hell aren't real and magic aren't real. It would be by convincing him that this person isn't capable of doing that. And it's because of their, mental status, or mental health status. And that I agree is playing a very dangerous and buying into a very dangerous, game and idea. And I noticed the same thing you did in the video about the de-escalation, which just didn't exist. And they checked like with a use of force expert for the article that we read, and who also agreed that they didn't create space. Now, the officer that wore the camera that we saw the footage of did create space. He was about as far away from Sonia Massi as he could have been. And that's what made her make the comment, "Where are you going?" It doesn't show whether Grayson moved or not, but he is close. And it seems like basically once the other guy turned around, he already had his hand on his gun, and you hear it come out. And then next thing you know, it's a different part of the scene. And there was no attempt at de-escalation. It was she made a joke. He immediately threatened her life, and she made there was no threat. And I think it was just completely unnecessary. He was overly aggressive.
I know that, and I'm bringing it to its logical conclusion, but if there was a gun laying on the counter, he wouldn't have said, "Go grab that gun and throw it in the sink. Go grab that gun and throw it in the sink." So if he thought that pot of boiling water was even remotely a threat that could cause that woman to be dead, he should have left that woman where she was, and he was closer to the water. But that's after sight, and hindsight is 2020. Sure. What I do want to say is that I definitely feel for the family, because I know that, whatever happens of this, justice is a very empty word, whatever that ultimately is. So I do hope that whatever justice they can get, that they are able to get that from this. But at this point, I know that it's just simply a level of pain. Cindy, was there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, we didn't say it here, but the medical examiner made an autopsy, and he confirmed that she was killed by one of the 3 bullets she received. And I'm not going to go into the details, but it shows without any doubt that he was above her, that the bullet was in a descendant trajectory. So she was cowering. She was no threat.
Yep, you can see in the video.
Yeah.
And of course, and I later he told them when they asked if they need medical equipment, he's like, it's a headshot, but you can. So he knew it was without a doubt a deliberate choice and unfortunate. Yeah. And I just want to say that I thank you for this very serious conversation. I just wanted to say to everyone out there, if you want to see more of the nonprofits, click here.